June 22, 1941. 4.00. General alarm for the entire squadron. On the airfield, everything is on the move. All night I heard the rumble of tanks and vehicles. We are only a few kilometers from the border. 4.30. All pilots ordered to gather at the squadron headquarters for a briefing. The commander, Captain Wojtke, read the Führer's special order to the armed forces of the Reich for the day. Germany is attacking the Soviet Union. 5.00. The squadron took to the air and went into action. 4 machines of our squadron, including mine, are equipped with a mechanism for dropping bombs, and I have undergone serious training in bombing over the past few weeks. I now have a bomb-dropping device and 105-pound bombs mounted on the fuselage of my good Emil. It will give me great pleasure to bomb the filthy Ivans. Flying low over the wide plains, we saw endless columns of German troops heading east. Squadrons of bombers and dive bombers flew not far from us in the same direction. We are tasked with attacking Russian headquarters located in the forests west of Druskininkai. In the Russian territory, to my surprise, everything seemed to be plunged into slumber. We located the Russian headquarters and flew over the wooden buildings at low altitude, but not a single Russian soldier could be seen. Diving down on one of these barns, I pressed a button and opened the bomb hatch. I could clearly feel how much lighter the airplane became, freed from the load. The others began bombing at the same time. Huge masses of earth surged into the air, and for a while we lost visibility because of the smoke and huge amounts of dust. One of the buildings instantly caught fire. The camouflage nets were torn off the vehicles, then they were overturned by the blast wave. Finally, the Ivans appeared. They scurried back and forth in confusion, resembling a disturbed anthill. Men in their underpants rushed into the woods in search of cover. I saw light anti-aircraft guns, capturing them in the scope, opened fire with machine guns and both cannons. Ivan, who was standing at the cannon in underpants, fell to the ground. Now the next one. Going in for the attack again, I gave them heat. The Russians quickly came to their senses and returned fire. That got me even more excited. Well, wait a minute, you bastards. I made another circle to attack. I had never shot so well before. I descended to a height of 6 meters, barely missing the treetops, then soared sharply upward. My Ivans were lying on the ground behind their cannon. One of them jumped up and rushed running into the woods. I attacked 5 or 6 more times. We circled over the Russians like a swarm of bees. Almost all the shacks were burning. I shot a truck, which also caught fire after the first turn. 5.56. The squadron returned in full strength. Smiles shone on the pilots' faces as they reported to the commander. Planes quickly refueled, loaded full ammunition. On the airfield, feverishly scurrying people and cars. The bombers have returned from their mission. They are supporting the ground forces. Their pilots are also jubilant. 6.30. Just 40 minutes after landing, we're back in the air. Our target is the same headquarters we attacked the other day. We can already see columns of smoke from the burning houses from afar and rush there. By this time, a significant air defense force is gathered to greet us. This is similar to the fighting at Canterbury. I worked the Ivanov anti-aircraft guns again. This time I dropped bombs on the firing position. The dirt and dust settled, and I saw that the cannon was smashed. That will save the Ivans a lot of trouble. The Russians seemed to have taken cover in the woods and hid their vehicles. We began methodically firing machine guns at the forest around the camp. In several places the fire blazed up. The fuel tanks must have caught fire. I shot every target I could see until I ran out of ammo. We got back at 7.20. Once again, our formation is instantly ready to go. The ground services work clearly and without error. We assist them and give a detailed description of what happens during the operation. This time we prepared the vehicles for departure in a record time of 22 minutes. We take off immediately. There is practically nothing left in the Russian camp. We attack any target spotted in the nearby woods. I dropped bombs over the last structure still intact. Krupinski did the same, destroying what was left. The camp was completely eliminated. After 48 minutes of flying, we returned to the airfield and spread out on Flight 0. We take a short respite and can eat for the first time all day. Soon a new order comes in. Transport columns of Russians spotted by our reconnaissance planes on the highway Grodno-Zhytomyr-Skidal-Shysin. They are retreating eastward, pursued on the heels of our tanks. We were ordered to support the tanks from the air. We take off at 10:07, together with the bombers. They are to bomb Russian artillery firing positions in the same area. Soon we reached Grodno. The roads are clogged with Russian troops. The reasons for the surprise attack prepared by our high command are gradually becoming clear to us. We appreciated the true extent of the Russian preparations for aggression against us. We were only ahead of their decisive offensive against Germany in the struggle for supremacy in Europe. This is a day I shall never forget. Our armies are advancing everywhere. The Russians are caught off guard. Our soldiers wave to us as we fly over them at low altitude. Russian troop concentrations on the roads are subjected to heavy bombardment and machine gun fire from the air. Thousands of Ivans are rapidly retreating. It becomes a disorderly rout. When we open fire, they stumble and bleed, trying to hide in the nearby forests. Our attacks leave burning vehicles on the roads. My bomb hit a wagon with horses carrying a heavy cannon. I'm glad I'm not down there. We took to the air at 8:00 p.m., the sixth time this first day. There was no sign of Russian aircraft, and we were able to attack without interference. June 23, 1941. We took to the air for the first time at 4:45. Again we worked but columns of Ivans. The morning is cold. Yesterday I was drenched in sweat all day. When the sun rises higher, it will be unbearably hot. Russian aircraft have not yet appeared. Not a single Russian airplane has been spotted so far. In the evening, my buddies from the 4th Link told me about the meeting with Russian fighters near Grodno. They say the Ivans have primitive machines. They are slow-moving, but surprisingly maneuverable. Lieutenant Gunther Gerhard, an old friend of mine from flight school days, shot down a Russian on the first day of fighting. Gunther arrived from the reserves only yesterday. He's a fine pilot. In the evening, after the last operation, I went to the 4th Squadron base to visit him and congratulate him on his first. Captain Wotk shot down 3 Russians in one battle. June 25, 1941. These bombing raids are getting more and more tiresome to me. My comrades in the 4th and 5th Links fought the Russians for 2 days, and we have missed it as we are busy on the bombardment. Now is the time for me to shoot down my first. The success of our army has exceeded all expectations. The Russians can't stop our advance. We're trying to break up their retreating units. Their air force doesn't seem particularly eager to fight. Russian fighter pilots are poorly trained. Their knowledge of battle tactics is as primitive as the machines they fly. In a few weeks, however, they will gain the necessary combat experience. Despite the stunning success at first, too much optimism on our part would be a mistake. The Russian soldier understands what he is fighting for. Communism has turned them into fanatics. July 2, 1941. The phone rang. A message from squadron headquarters. Lieutenant Noak was ordered to report to the commander. What did the old man want with me? I put on my harness and pistol and went to headquarters. Captain Wojtki was sitting in a high chair. I greeted him. Lieutenant Noak reporting. Wojtka rose from his chair and shook my hand. Orders from the Air Force Personnel Department. You are assigned to the 1st Fighter Air Group and must arrive as soon as possible at the disposal of the commander in Guzuma. An hour later, I took to the air in my good old Immel. The oldest machine in the squadron had finished its combat service and was to be transferred to the flying school at Verneuken, where it would be used as a training machine. The Russian campaign is over for both of us. This disappointed me, but there was nothing to be done. An order is an order. I landed at Verneuken this evening. Tomorrow morning I have to go by train via Hamburg to Husum. It is in a remote place on the North Sea coast. July 30, 1941. The first fighter wing at present consists of only one squadron. The other two squadrons should be formed within the next few weeks. I have been assigned to the 3rd Squadron. The wing commander, like myself, came from the Russian front. Life here is very quiet. Since my arrival, I have flown very much without noticing a single Tommy. The only disturbance is caused by sudden alarms caused by the appearance of enemy spy planes. So far, we have not been able to shoot down a single one. August 3, 1941. The squadron is transferred to the islands of Vangerouge and Borkum in the North Sea. August 17, 1941. Every day we are engaged in air cover of naval convoys from Bremen or Hamburg to the English Channel. British Blenheims and Beaufighters attack our convoys. But in general, the activity here is very low. Our pilots are constantly shooting down Tommies trying to attack our ships. Our planes are equipped with extra tanks. Flying over the sea for several hours turns into monotonous work. August 26, 1941. At 10:00 am, the Deputy Wing Commander, Senior Lieutenant Rumpf, called me and informed me that my request for permission to marry had been granted. I applied to the commander for permission to leave. He was in very good spirits and allowed me to take the squadron's communications plane, a small Bucker Jungmeister. This saved me from a tedious train trip. I could depart today, and the day after tomorrow Lilo, and I would be married. At 12:00 noon, my plane took to the air. I made a circle over the airfield before lying on the right course. To my bride. My comrades waved to me. I enjoyed the flight. It was a beautiful summer day, and it was hard to imagine a more beautiful landscape. I fly through the clouds, slowly drifting eastward across the blue sky. The small engine plods bravely forward. I'm descending over fields and lakes. Farmers harvesting their crops, children frolicking in the water. Soon, I'll see Lilo. 3 hours later, I landed in Prenzlau, refueled, and continued my flight to Lilo. Suddenly, the weather turned bad. My little Bucher is being rocked by gusts of wind. Visibility is getting worse and worse. I can no longer fly to Posen, where I was going to make my next stop. It's better to wait out this weather in a safe place. Lilo won't want to marry a reckless pilot. I set a course for Verneuken, and at 4:31 p.m. landed there in the pouring rain. August 27, 1941. I really wanted to fly out at 6:00, but could not get permission until 8:30. The rain is drizzling, not stopping for a minute, but visibility is better than yesterday. It took me almost 3 hours to fly to Posen, where the pilot training base is located. Here again, I waited a long time for permission to take off. Dan rain. All domestic flights are forbidden by order of the meteorologists. Damn them. I was hoping to meet Lilo today. I headed for my plane. Training flights are forbidden in close proximity to the airfield. 7 or 8 small training biplanes were taking off and landing a few at a time. There were several Buchers among them. That's when a brilliant idea occurred to me. I got into the airplane, started the engine, and drove up to the runway. There one of the cadets was hurriedly writing down the flight data. He waved at me and asked my name. Of course, he couldn't recognize me. I told him I was only going to do a little circling, and he didn't have to write me down. He noticed my buttonholes, and, clicking his heels, said, "Very good." I grinned to myself as I taxied out onto the runway. After taking off and landing a few times, I waved to the guy at the control car. Watching me, he raised a green flag, giving me permission to take off. I flew low until I disappeared behind the trees, out of sight of the airfield services. I then set a course for Lodz. After I had flown 100 kilometers, the weather became terrible. Clouds descended to a height of 30 meters. Visibility dropped to dangerous levels, and there was a rain curtain ahead. I was flying at a height of only a few meters, with gusts of wind tossing me from side to side. As I flew over the villages, I saw people with their heads tilted back, looking at me. Astonishment was written on their faces. Not far from Calais, I found the railroad tracks between Breslau and Lodz. Visibility was practically nil. Whatever happens, I must not lose sight of these tracks. I shuddered at the thought of a forced landing. Disaster would be inevitable, and I would be court-martialed. Disbarment would have been a fine wedding present for Lieutenant Noak. Suddenly, I saw the horizon ahead. I was out of the rain zone, and the clouds were already at an altitude of 1,000 meters. In a few minutes, I was already over Shiraz. After the hostilities in Poland, my father returned here and worked as chief of police for over a year. Lilo is down there too. I flew over the police building. Lilo lives there with my parents. I flew higher and made 2 or 3 circles. People came out into the streets and stared at me, almost wringing their necks. The door to the balcony in my parents' apartment opened. My father, mother, and sister stepped out onto the balcony. Lilo came out behind them, waving a white handkerchief. I made a final circle over the house, almost hitting the roof, then set a course for Lodz, where I landed. An hour and a half later, Lilo was in my arms. When I told her that we could get married tomorrow, she couldn't believe her ears. My parents were also very surprised, since I had not informed them that I was coming. August 28, 1941. All the formalities necessary to perform the marriage ceremony were quickly taken care of in the morning. At 5 p.m. Lilo and I walked out of the marriage hall as husband and wife. Our room in the apartment looked like a flower store. I have nothing more to say about this day. We are perfectly happy. August 29, 1941. I am off again on a flight for several long hours. Landed only at Frankfurt and Schwerin for refueling. Returned to the location of our link at 17.00, where I was met with a warm welcome by my comrades. Shortly before darkness fell, an alert was announced, and I took off to intercept the Blenheims spotted near the coast. We failed to find them. During the last 2 days, I had almost forgotten about the war. January 1, 1942. The coast of the North Sea became almost home to me. I made more than 100 sorties, including convoy escorts and sorties on alert to intercept Blenheims and Wellingtons over the open sea in bad weather. In the West, fighting has virtually ceased. The Tommies now seldom appear during the day. Our night fighters have more work to do than we do. Even over the English Channel is quiet now. In the East, our troops have made impressive gains. The advanced German forces have reached the gates of Moscow. But now, with the onset of winter, the German command faced serious problems that could not have been foreseen. What the German soldiers have to endure is beyond description. The troops are not accustomed to the Russian winter, and their equipment is unsuitable for action in such conditions. Urgent measures are being taken to remedy the situation as soon as possible. Some of my old comrades in the 52nd Fighter Air Group have died in the last few months, but they have managed to shoot down many enemy aircraft. I learned that Gunther Gerhard crashed on takeoff after shooting down 18 Russians. Barkhorn and Rahl received awards after destroying over 100 Russians. I was very sorry I couldn't stay with them. In the fall, we were transferred to the Baltic for a few days. We participated in maneuvers with the newly manned battleship Tirpitz. I had the opportunity to control fighter flights for several days from aboard a huge warship. Since September, we have been stationed at the new airbase at Jever Airfield. Now the headquarters of our air group was located here. February 8, 1942. Islands in the North Sea cut off from the mainland by ice. In addition to combat operations, we carry emergency communications between the islands and the mainland. We deliver mail and groceries, and on special occasions transport civilians. February 10, 1942. Air Command to the west has issued a general alert. Part of the fleet outside territorial waters at Brest, including the battleships Prince Eugene and Gneisenau, several cruisers and destroyers, are expected to make their way into the English Channel and on to Norway. It is expected that the British will try to prevent our fleet to fulfill their task. In the English Channel is now unfolding such an active action as during the fighting for England. In the fighter air squadrons at the Channel is maintained round-the-clock readiness. The fleet is out of base. The weather's the worst it's ever been. It's not safe to fly. both for the British and for us. In the evening, we moved to an airfield near the coast of Holland. February 11, 1942. A foggy morning prevents us from taking off, but by 10 o'clock the visibility has improved. We sit idle for hours, ready to take off. We should be ready to take off within a minute. We're getting reports from the channel. As we expected, the British are attacking despite very bad weather conditions. They're throwing even the oldest planes into the fight. Our crews report fighting obsolete British torpedo carriers of the swordfish type. It is unlikely that any of these planes will return to base. The British are taking heavy casualties, but continue their stubborn resistance. Our old enemy once again demonstrates his bravery. A storm is raging over our airfield, periodic snowfalls are occurring, and we are forced to abandon flights. February 12, 1942. Our fleet has reached the Pas de Calais and is near Calais. The British continue suicide flights. So far, no attempt to strike our fleet has been successful. However, their long-range coastal artillery off Dover is hitting our ships, causing considerable damage. The weather is on our side. Our planes remain at the airfield. February 13, 1942. 10.16. Action alert. Clearing the airfield, covered with snow, did not take long. Over the sea, our formation came under massive attacks by the Tommies. They sent in the remnants of their swordfish. The British pilots knew they were going to their deaths. Our mission is to intercept the attacking Blenheims. Visibility is still poor. We're trying to see something through the fog. The sea below is covered with waves. Suddenly, the minesweepers show up, and the commander fires an identifying flare. Our ships are ordered to open fire on approaching planes. My plane is rocked by gusts of sudden wind. The wings almost touch the white crests of huge green waves. From the base, constantly transmitting data on the location of the enemy. The further we fly over the sea, the worse the quality of communication becomes. We've been in the air for 15 minutes. According to the reports from the base, we could run into the Blenheims at any moment. I adjusted my reflex sights and readied my weapons. Suddenly, I saw some vague shadows in the fog to my left. It was them. We immediately reorganized. Everyone wanted to be the first to meet the enemy. Sergeant Wolf is walking beside me. 6 months ago, he became my wingman. He nodded, and through the plexiglass window I could see his wide, white-toothed smile. The Blenheims turned out to be 12. 12 of us, too. One for each of us. One of the Englishmen appeared in my scope, and I prepared to fire before he spotted me. Tommy took off sharply upward, trying to hide in the clouds. I followed him, keeping him in my sights. Fire. I pressed both throttles and saw my tracer shells penetrate his left wing and hit the fuselage. We both made a steep left turn. I keep hitting the throttles. I hit his left engine. The cloud obscured what was happening. Tommy disappeared into the clouds. Suddenly, there's a rumble. The cockpit is full of shrapnel, and there's a huge hole right above my shoulder. Touché. I noticed that the shell that hit my left wing. It's the Blenheim, again, just ahead. I opened fire and dove into the clouds. The Tommy flying in front of me turned into a huge shadow. I smelled the odor of burning. Dropping speed, after a few seconds I saw the sea again. What if my airplane is on fire? I looked back cautiously. The flap hanging behind me on my right had been torn off. The plexiglass window at the rear of the fuselage had been shattered. My Tommy was no longer visible. The smell of burning still lingered. God damn it. What the hell is going on? The engine's running smooth. The RPMs aren't dropping. The gauges say it's fine. What's burning? The Blenheim is badly damaged, but if he's lucky, he'll make it to the English coast while I fall into the sea, engulfed in flames. That's a good one. I made a wide turn to the left. By my calculations, following a course of 100, I could reach the Dutch coast. My comrades are nowhere to be seen. I try to call them on the radio, but get no reply. The minutes drag on endlessly. It is now 11.26. I have been in the air for 70 minutes. The smell of burning is gradually diminished, and the hatch is coming off more and more. I could surely see the ground now. I'd have to realize where I am. I do not trust my compass, but in spite of this, I always hope it does not deceive. In 10 minutes, I'll have to land. The arrow on the fuel gauge is pointing to 0. Land flashed by, but I was over water again, even though I hadn't changed course. Is this damn compass working or not? There's no point in changing course now. I'm flying in the same direction. Up ahead, the land showed itself again, a flat plain with dots of lakes blocked by dams. I finally realized where I was. I'm in the north of Holland. 2 minutes later, I landed on the landing strip at Leeuwarden. The soldiers standing next to the control tower were crowded around my plane. It was a depressing picture. When I tried to open the overhead hatch, it came off and fell onto the wing. Behind my head, part of the fuselage had been blown off. There were several lacerations on the right side. The metal was charred and blackened. That's why I could smell the burning. At headquarters, I saw a calendar. Today is the 13th. Something bad is bound to happen on the 13th. It's my unlucky day. You're very lucky, the dispatcher said. He's right, of course. These prejudices are nonsense, but we continue to believe in them. February 14, 1942. The weather is terrible. Endless snowstorms are raging. I am ordered to fly back to Javer in a Mi-108 Typhoon, but it is impossible to take off. I call my squadron headquarters in Vangeroog. Senior Lieutenant Bloom, Deputy Commander, is at the phone. Heinz, old boy, where have you gone? You are assigned to the Deputy Lozicate 8 in the Special Purpose Unit. You are ordered to leave for Norway tomorrow. That's wonderful news. I promised to leave as soon as the sky cleared up a bit. Late in the afternoon, the clouds began to clear. Occasionally a dim sun broke through. We took to the air. The non-commissioned officer is in control. I can relax in the padded chair and enjoy the view of the wide plains of Frisia. Arriving at Jever, I immediately reported to the Chief of Special Operations, Captain Lozicate. He is a short man of fine reputation, who arrived a few days ago from Japan, after a few months' vacation. He had served at the flight school as an instructor for the Japanese Air Force. We were working well past midnight, with a lot to do. The new recruits have arrived, instructors from different flight schools. Each came in his own airplane. 2 new units are in the process of formation, commanders, Senior Lieutenant Eberl and Lieutenant Freinein. The third link, which includes me, commanded by Captain Dolenga 10. They all arrived at the disposal of Lozicate. February 15, 1942. In the morning arrived 2 U-52s and 2 B-34s. They are to deliver equipment, food and equipment for Operation Barbed Wire, and ground personnel to maintain our aircraft in Norway. These transports will depart for Oslo as soon as they are loaded. The squadron departs at 10:20. Senior Lieutenant Eberl has arrived at Aalborg with his pilots. He hopes to be in formation in 2 days. His planes are being repaired day and night. February 18, 1942. A fine French wine was served in the officers' mess hall. Soon we were no longer concerned about the weather outside. February 19, 1942. The 3rd Squadron is completely ready. Eberl is very gloomy as he is to face a court-martial. The meteorologists are predicting better weather for tomorrow. I won't believe it until I see with my own eyes. February 20, 1942. The airplanes on the airfield are ready for takeoff. A wall of snow is falling, covering the entire airfield. The weather service keeps saying the weather is improving. Pilots hang around the airplanes, shivering from the cold and grumbling. At noon, a bus takes them back to their barracks, and the meteorologists keep insisting that the weather is improving. This time they were right. At 3:35 p.m., the squadron took to the air. Hopefully, the Tommies hadn't sent our ships to the bottom by then. We crossed the stormy bays off the Danish coast. 50 minutes later, the rocky coast of Norway came into view. We were flying low, almost touching the waves. Soon we approached the Oslo Fjord. About 53 kilometers from Oslo in the mountains there is an airstrip. It is covered in deep snow, as is the rest of the field. This is Gardermoen. The landing is at 16.50. February 24, 1942. For 3 days we stay in the mountains as if on a desert island. The steep peaks north of the airfield are hidden in the clouds. 3 long, arduous days. In the morning, U-88, adapted for blind flight, took to the air and transmitted several messages about the weather in the area. The reports were positive. We could fly. Flying over the high peaks of Norway is as dangerous as it is beautiful. The snow-covered mountains, riddled with deep gorges, rise to 3,000 meters. To the west of us, the mountains end in a sheer precipice by the sea. In recent months, several of our airplanes have crashed making forced landings on these snow-capped peaks. We spent about 90 minutes in the air, fuel used up to the last drop, and we landed in Trondheim. I had never seen an airfield like this before. It sits on a mountain plateau above the city and harbor. To the north and west, the mountains drop off sharply to a fjord deep into the mountains. The only runway, 800 meters long and 30 meters wide, is covered with wooden blocks. The runway became icy after it was cleared of snow. February 25, 1942. The commander and I set up headquarters in a small wooden house near the runway. It is terribly cold here. Last night, the 36,000-ton Prince Eugene entered the fjord. It was badly damaged in a mine explosion and needs repairs. Our airplanes are constantly monitoring the airspace over the fjord. Steam from the engines hangs in the icy air. We're expecting Tommy attacks. They won't let the ship we're guarding slip through their fingers so easily. It's too big a target for them. According to the information I am getting, almost all of our warships have taken more or less serious damage while crossing the channel. Gneisenau is in the port of Kiel. February 26, 1942. At 13.12 our acoustic radars announced the approach of one enemy airplane at high speed. A scout. At 13.15 I took off from the airfield alone, determined to find this scoundrel. I climbed to an altitude of 8,000 meters. Our patrol has been ordered to control the space above the Prince Eugene. I'm continuing to look around for the intruder. No sign of Tommy. The reports from the ground were not very clear. They were of no value to me as they were vague. After 85 minutes, I stopped searching and landed. February 27, 1942. The annoying guest had returned. I went up to get him, but he eluded me again. February 28, 1942. The sergeant navigator from headquarters, excited, came running into my room where I had already been doing business for several hours. "Mr. Noak, that plane has appeared again." I jumped out the window and, sliding, ran down the icy slope to the runway. The siren wailed. The mechanics had already prepared my plane for takeoff. The camouflage net was dropped on the snow, and the hatch was open. Already as I was fastening my seatbelt, the inertial starter roared. Contact. The mechanics closed the hatch and jumped off the wing. I turned on the ignition, and the engine roared to life. A cloud of sparkling snow swept up behind my airplane. It took me giving full throttle to get the airplane moving through the deep snow. A few seconds later, I was in the air. The time is 11:46. Ground services are working great today. I'm getting continuous reports on Tommy's whereabouts. Not far from Christiansand, he crossed the coast, just like yesterday and the day before. The altitude is 8,000 meters. After 18 minutes of flight, I climbed to the same altitude as the Englishman. Bandit in Bertha Kurfürst, Hanny 80 zone. Came the message from the base. This meant that the intruder was in the area marked on the map as Sector BK, at an altitude of 8,000 meters, so I could run into him at any moment. The cloud cover is making it a little difficult to see. I need to be very careful. A bandit in the Bertha Ludwig zone. Damn it. Where's the bastard headed? I turned my head one way, then the other. I entered the cloud zone and turned right. Suddenly, I tensed up. There it was, a few meters above me. A Spitfire. The Royal Air Force sign was the size of a trolley wheel. I leaped up sharply. I've got to get him. But by this time, he had spotted me too and turned sharply in my direction, raced toward the ground and leveled the plane far below me. Reducing my speed, I made a left turn. I couldn't let him out of my sight. I pulled the steering wheel toward me with both hands, climbing vertically upward. It seemed like someone's giant hand was pinning me to the seat. My eyes went black for a while. I saw him again. He was moving toward the open sea, gaining altitude. I chased him at full speed. The engine roared like a wild beast. The wings shuddered with tension. I took aim and opened fire. We've got to get closer. In order to increase speed, I closed the radiator caps. It didn't matter that the radiator might boil over, that the engine might go to pieces. I must get him by all means. The Spitfire went down like a meteor. This airplane is really great, and the guy at the wheel knows what he's doing and has nerves of iron. 7,000 meters. I see him in my scope and fire again. 6,000 meters. The distance is too far, about 300 meters. 4,000 meters. My engine is starting to overheat. 3,000 meters. The dive is even steeper than before. 2,000 meters. The Spitfire is faster. The distance between us is increasing. My eardrums are bursting and my head is hot. Vertical dive is a pilot's hell. I rip the oxygen mask off my face. A strong odor of glycol is spreading. My engine is overheating. The temperature is rising. The gauges indicate a speed of 1,000 kilometers per hour. 1,000 meters. Tommy is slowly coming out of the dive. We're both flying very low over a snow-covered field in the high coastal mountains. This Spitfire is a beautiful airplane. The distance between us is steadily increasing. We have reached the open sea. I've given up the chase. My engine was about to explode. I've dropped speed and opened the radiator caps. My Tommy was now just a dot on the horizon. Making a wide turn and heading for land, I flew over Inner Fjord, surrounded by sheer cliffs. A stunning sight for someone who can appreciate it. I landed at 1:00 p.m., felt all shivering with rage and cold, not to mention the aftermath of this frenzied picnic, which of course is no picnic walk either. Bring me a double brandy. March 4, 1942. My Tommy hasn't shown up for 3 days. The commander has promised a bottle of real Hennessy as a reward to whoever can shoot down an Englishman. A fine prize, especially here in the far north. Of course, I didn't care about the prize so much as I wanted to shoot down the bastard. I am a fighter pilot, and so I must get him. March 5, 1942. A signal from headquarters. He's here again. I jump through the window and soon find myself in the cockpit of my airplane. In a few seconds, I'm already taking off. 12.02. Steeply gaining altitude in a cloudless sky. 12.10. Altitude 5,000 meters. I check the oxygen mask. It's very cold. Bandits in the Kieserida Hani 70 zone. Victor. Victor. Message received. I replied. Altitude 6,000 meters. Bandit in the zone. Kaiser Kurfürst. Victor. Victor. Message received. Altitude 7,000 meters. I need to climb to 8,000 meters. I have to finish him today. The bandit is in the Bertha Ludwig area. I think he's circling the northern end of the strait, heading for our warship anchorage. I'm now at 8,000 meters, surveying the airspace. Ahead on the left, I saw a small dark dot in the sky. It's a Spitfire, with a thin white streak trailing behind it. Tommy makes a wide turn, heading for Inner Fjord. I maintain altitude and study my prey. Once above his target, Tommy made circle after circle, taking pictures. I took the opportunity to get a comfortable position above him. Apparently, he's so engrossed in his work that he doesn't notice me. I'm now 1,000 meters above him. He was heading west. I picked up speed and checked my weapon, heading straight down at him. I'm on his tail. Fire. My shells penetrated his fuselage. He began to rock desperately. We can't let him get away. I'm gonna use every bit of firepower I've got. He dove down, then leveled off. Black smoke billowed out of his tail, growing denser and denser. I fired again. Suddenly something splattered on the front window. Oil. My engine. Visibility's really bad. I can't see the Spitfire. Damn it. My engine's running smooth. Oil must have leaked out of the downed Spitfire. I take a slight right so I can see Tommy out the side window. He's slowly losing speed, but he's not going down yet. The black smoke is not so thick anymore. Suddenly I saw another Messerschmitt approaching from the left. This is Lieutenant Dieter Gerhard, my old comrade. I told him on the radio that I can no longer shoot. Then let me finish him off, Heinz. He opened fire. The right wing of the Spitfire broke off. The plane began to fall, spinning like an autumn leaf. And the pilot? Is he alive? I got a lump in my throat. He's a guy like me. If he's alive, why isn't he parachuting? The Spitfire goes down, engulfed in flames, hitting the snow-covered field. It will crash, and with it the pilot. I shouted as if he could hear me. Jump, boy, jump. After all, he too is a man, too a soldier, too a pilot, with the same love of the sky and clouds as I have. I wonder if he has a wife, maybe a girl like Lilo. Jump, boy, jump. Finally, a man separated from the flaming airplane. A white parachute opened and began to drift slowly toward the mountains. My joy is indescribable. This is the first victory in aerial combat. I had defeated another pilot, and he was still alive. Dieter and I shared a bottle of brandy. We made a toast to our fighters and another to Tommy. Dieter delivered him on skis after landing in the mountains on the Fieseler Storch. This is a Royal Air Force officer, a tall, lean guy. A good swig of skate brought him to his senses. He laughed along with everyone else when I explained that this bottle of cognac was dedicated to him. March 6, 1942. In the morning, an order came unexpectedly from Air Force headquarters that we were to be transferred back to Germany. My head was pounding. The party last night in the officers' mess hall had been very violent, I remembered. At noon, a formation of fighter bombers landed at the airfield. They would replace us. We headed south. The sky was cloudless. Ahead flies twin-engine Messerschmitt 110, equipped with autopilot and radio compass. We are flying nonstop to Oslo, Fornebu. The fuel in our tanks is barely enough for such a flight. Once again, I marveled at the splendor of the Norwegian mountains, wide slopes covered with snow, glaciers, cut by narrow ravines, so deep that the sun did not always reach their bottom. Low cliffs protruded into the sea, forming rugged edges. In open formation, we fly around the leading Messerschmitt 110. My engine runs smoothly, monotonously, so it costs me a lot of effort not to fall asleep. No chatter on the air. We're flying over steep peaks near Roro. The scenery is marvelous. Not so appealing is the thought of being forced to land on this rugged terrain or parachuting into the abyss. I think my fuel gauge is out of order. According to it, I'm using 3 times as much fuel as usual. Of course, that's impossible. I know from experience that my engine is very economical. I took some pictures. I think Lilo will be pleased to get such beautiful pictures. Lilo. A few weeks ago, she went to visit her aunt in Tübingen. We are going to have a baby soon. She writes that in August, I started to remember the last time we saw each other. But what's this? The red warning light on the fuel gauge came on. Good God, this can't be happening. We've only been in flight for 30 minutes. Only now I can clearly smell the gas. Could it be? Damn it. Only I could be so lucky as to make an emergency landing in this icy desert. I radioed Captain Losikit. Jumbo 2 to Jumbo 1. I've got a fuel leak. Nothing left. I have 5 minutes to make an emergency landing. The commander grunted in response. There's nothing he can do to help. We both know that. Jumbo 2 is making a landing. We need to get low and look for a place to land before the engine stalls. Good luck. Soft landing. After wishing me luck, my comrades continued their flight. They can't delay. Every minute counts. The mountains below are over 2,000 meters high. Their slopes are covered with snow. On close inspection, I saw a lot of crevices and huge boulders. Here landing is impossible. There will be no wet place left from me and from the airplane. Sleepiness is completely gone. I am tense to the limit. Ahead is a glacier. Next to it is a small mountain lake. It's frozen and covered with ice. Apparently, the lake is deep. Will the ice hold? Well, I have no other choice. I've prepared for landing. It should be a soft landing on the very top of the glacier. Reduce speed. Lower the flaps. The propeller's frozen. The ground's coming toward me. Don't release the landing gear. Now it's quiet. The landing is soft as butter. The snow dust is flying up. 100 meters I slid on the squeaky snow. Finally, my plane came to a stop. I opened the hatch and jumped on the wing. Took out my duffel bag and fur jacket. The ice seems to creak under the weight of the airplane. It cracks and crunches. Will it hold? I ran to the nearest rocks and was relieved to feel the solid ground under my feet. My knees were trembling from the excitement I had experienced. Many pilots who have made an emergency landing in such places have paid with their lives. It is now about 3:00 p.m. In an hour my comrades will land in Oslo and call for help. They saw where I landed. But in any case I will have to spend the day here. To the west of where I landed, I noticed a gorge. Walked a few hundred meters in a westerly direction. From the top of the hill, I can survey the plain. On the other side, 600 meters below, I noticed a road. The steep cliffs are impregnable to me. Furthermore, there are no signs of human life around, as far as I can discern. My airplane is flat on the ice. I think the ice is firm enough to bear the weight. I'll spend the night in the cockpit. I'm starting to feel hungry. In my pockets I have chocolate and a few cigarettes. With that, I can make it through the morning. It's a good thing I took my fur jacket with me before I left. It comes in handy as it gets colder and colder. As darkness fell, I pulled out my parachute and wrapped myself in it. It got warmer. Then I crawled into the cockpit and closed the hatch. I watched the snow swirling in the sky until I fell asleep in the seat. March 7, 1942. During the night I woke up several times, stiff from the uncomfortable position, went out and jogged near the airplane. Toward midnight the snow fell in a wall. By morning only the tail and propeller blade of my Messerschmitt were visible. The snow is now falling rather sluggishly. I can't see more than 100 meters around. They can't help me from the air. That's clear. Are they even going to look for me? There is no point in walking as I will quickly lose all orientation in this storm. The time is 8:00. I ate a bar of chocolate and chewed one cigarette. Chewed because I have no fire. It dulled the hunger. Had been sitting in the airplane as it was warmer, but now went out again for a walk. I went through the tools for nothing and found that the electrical equipment was intact. I fired a few bursts from the machine gun. Fountains of snow rose above the surface of the lake. The echo of the shots echoed repeatedly in the dead silence of the mountains. It must have been heard several kilometers away. Hour after hour I wait patiently. Are they looking for me or not? I chew a few more cigarettes, the feeling of hunger growing stronger. Nicotine eases the suffering. It's probably never going to stop snowing. It's 2:00 p.m. The weather is getting worse. The wind is picking up. Every hour I fire a machine gun. If the sky clears up at night, I can fire a flare. I've lost all sense of time in this endless waiting. It's night again. The snow comes down in rapid gusts. The silk of the parachute is very soft, delicate, like the dress of a beautiful woman. In my mind I can go anywhere. And it's hard to get out of here otherwise. I am frozen to the bone, and I don't go out anywhere. I sit and shiver like a dog. Despite my fur jacket and parachute, it must be the hunger. My stomach has rebelled against the tobacco I've been chewing. I try to sleep, feeling hungry and cold. March 8, 1942. It is noon again. It has stopped snowing. They have to find me today or I won't get out of here. Every now and then I give short bursts. They must find me today. At 4 p.m. I heard a dog barking, and a minute later I saw a beautiful Irish setter. He greeted me loudly. Soon I was shaking hands with a senior lieutenant from the Alpine Regiment. March 9, 1942. During the night I was taken by car to Oslo. I immediately reported to the duty officer at Air Force headquarters. I had a good night's sleep this morning in a hotel room placed at my disposal. At noon, a transport plane bound for the Reich will pick me up. It will take me to Aalborg in Denmark. There, the Losignight Squadron waits out the bad weather. March 10, 1942. Yesterday, I met a warm welcome from my comrades. They liked my Irish setter, Turret, very much. I bought him from a mountain troop. At 3:11 p.m., we returned to Jever. Turret lay quietly in the luggage compartment behind my back during the flight. The Special Operations Squadron had been disbanded. Dieter and I returned to our former links. June 21, 1942. After my return from Norway, I have already flown over 150 combat sorties, patrolling the airspace over the North Sea from bases Jever, Vangeroog, and Guzum. All the pilots are excellent professionals and good guys. Our commander is Captain Dolenga. I am his deputy, and Lieutenant Gerard, whom I know from the 52nd Fighter Air Group, is our chief engineer. Lieutenant Steiger was assigned to us a few months ago. He is a tall, red-haired fellow, a fine pilot who shot down his first Blenheim in an attack on our naval convoy a few days ago. Non-commissioned officers Moll, Vogt, and Dubrick are experienced soldiers. They were awarded the Iron Cross of the First Degree in the Battle of England. Sergeants Wenekers 13 and Radats started the war in Holland a year ago. Sergeant Bierman, a short guy from Berlin, came from Russia. Like me, he was with the infantry in Poland at the beginning of the war. The ground staff, too, is made up of very skilled personnel. Most of them are specialists who have previously worked in the civil service. Only a small part of them are professional soldiers. It's the same with the pilots. For about a year, Corporal Arndt has been in charge of the group that maintains my airplane. This dedicated guy, my Messerschmitt 109, and I form an inseparable trio. We stayed together for a long time. It would be unfair not to mention our four-legged friends. Turret, my setter, is beautiful and spoiled. His temperament is like that of a prima donna. He is the fastest dog in the Air Force. Phipps, the monkey, is our mascot. A complete anarchist. She doesn't recognize discipline at all. During another inspection, she snatched the colonel's cap and climbed up on the hangar roof with it. It was the funniest inspection I ever saw. Phipps had been warned that she would be sent to the Russian front. She would probably be our secret weapon. If the Russians saw her, they would laugh so hard they couldn't fire. That's how we pilots live in our strange little world, at the end of the runway. June 22, 1942. To my surprise, last night came the order that some of the airplanes of our link are transferred to Holland under my command. For operational purposes, I came under the direct command of Division Headquarters, where the latest methods of air control and interception are in use. At night, our airplanes were equipped with the latest ultra-shortwave receivers. I was ordered to test the new BI system under combat conditions. For this purpose, I was given latitude and broad authority. Among other documents, I received the following written credential from Division Headquarters. Lieutenant Noak is assigned to the experimental unit of the 2nd Air Corps for special assignments of the High Command, this work being very important to the conduct of the war effort. It is hereby certified that he is authorized to land at any airfield, including those outside the territories of the 1st Fighter Division and the 12th Air Corps. Signed by Major, General Staff Representative to Division Headquarters. The introduction of the new Y system has greatly improved long-range radio communication between the airplane in flight and the base. In effect, this means that the base can locate our pilots and direct their flight at any time. The headquarters turned into a huge concrete bomb shelter. In the center, a huge map of Holland is mounted on mirrored glass. At the far end of this giant map is a high platform where girls in military uniforms with headphones and microphones sit. The girls receive reports of approaching enemy planes from radars along the coast and mark on the maps showing changes in their location. Other girls locate our planes using the buy system and mark them on the map as well. In front of the map is another area with a complex system of microphones and switches. From here, each link of airplanes can be directed by officers from the ground by means of an ultra-shortwave radio telephone. One glance at the map is enough to see a complete picture of the situation at a given moment. All information is examined by the division commander, sitting at a desk with control instruments, with a senior officer from the general staff, and the chief of intelligence. On their desk are all the division's radio, telephone, and teletype communication lines. Next door is the room where weather reports from all the weather stations are systematized before they go to the main control panel. The other two floors are occupied by operations, administrative, and technical services. Approximately 1,000 officers, non-commissioned officers, soldiers, technicians, meteorologists, administrative workers, and a host of pretty girls serve this aircraft control headquarters. This think tank, day and night. August 18, 1942. During the past 2 months, I have made over 200 test flights. Several times over the mouth of the Scheldt, we have been attacked by Spitfires, often outnumbering us. It was a miracle we escaped. Experiments with the I system gave excellent results. All Western Air Forces are equipped with the system we tried. Surveillance services of the same type have been set up in Stade, Metz, Munich, Vienna, and Berlin. The General Command of the Air Force is preparing to meet the intense air attacks on the Reich after America's entry into the war. October 2, 1942. Me-109E was replaced a few months ago by the improved Me-109F. A few days earlier, the first G-series machines had rolled off the assembly lines. The flight data of the Gustav, as we called the Me-109G, was definitely better than that of the Spitfire. Captain Marcel, whom I met at the Palais des Sports in Berlin as a cadet, had shot down no less than 16 Spitfires in a single sortie on the Gustav 2 years earlier. A few weeks ago, he received Germany's highest award for bravery from the hands of the Führer after shooting down 150 enemy planes in the skies of Africa. 2 days ago, Hans Joachim Marcel, undefeated, died as a true pilot near El Alamein. The engine of his Gustav suddenly caught fire in midair. Marcel jumped out with a parachute, but the parachute caught on the tail stabilizer. Comrades delivered his body from the desert. We lost our number 1 ace. Something strange happened today, a few hours after we learned of Marcel's death. At 12:15, we were alerted. I took to the air with Sergeant Wennekers, my wingman. In the vicinity of Oldenburg, a mosquito was spotted making a reconnaissance flight. Wennekers lagged behind more and more. At an altitude of 4,000 meters, I lost sight of him. I called him on the radio, but got no reply. Suddenly, I saw the burning wreckage of an airplane that had just crashed into a wide field. Wennekers. Mosquito disappeared before I reached his altitude. I gave up the pursuit and decided to return to Jever. Landing, I couldn't believe my eyes. Wennekers was standing there smiling at me. His Gustav had caught fire for no apparent reason, just as Marcel's plane had 3 days earlier. The fire originated in the front of the engine and began to advance through the hull. This incident confused us. A few days ago, the 4th Squadron had lost a Gustav under exactly the same circumstances. Similar reports were also coming in from other squadrons. I began to look at my airplane with apprehension. October 31, 1942. A few days ago, Captain Dolunga was assigned to the night fighters. The leadership is entrusted to me. Despite the bad weather, we have been escorting convoys since early morning, together with the fleet. At 14:14 came the message that Blenheims attack our convoy. 2 minutes later, I'm in the air with Lieutenant Gerhardt. Our patrol on duty is already in combat. The wing commander, Sergeant Dobrik, has asked for help. Fuel is running low, and they should be back to base in a few minutes. I reached the battle site in a few minutes. To the north of me, my comrades are fighting fiercely with 4 Blenheims. One enemy plane is already on fire. A few seconds later, it fell into the sea. The others tried to hide in the fog. I did not lose sight of them, and prepared to attack the Blenheim from behind. I gave a long line from all machine guns and cannons, and saw that the enemy's right engine had caught fire. He began to fall sharply into the low clouds and soon disappeared from sight. Was visible only a red glow after I landed. From our ship reported that they saw the burning Blenheim fell into the sea in the sector Antonquel 3. That must have been mine. So I had shot down my second airplane. November 6, 1942. 12.00. From the division headquarters came a report of 2 approaching mosquitoes. At the same moment my phone rang. Lieutenant Kramer, the duty officer of the division headquarters 14, asked if I could take to the air in such bad weather. I replied that I could not. At a height of 30 meters, solid shroud of clouds, visibility is 0. I can't even see the other end of the airfield. I'm sorry, Kramer, but that's impossible. In this crappy weather, the Tommies will crash without our help. It's been raining for hours, a monotonous drizzle. The pilots are idle, some playing cards or writing letters home, others sleeping in the next room. I noted the movement of the mosquitoes on the map. They're flying deep into Reich territory, to the very heart of Germania. An hour later, we got a message that they were over Berlin, and our anti-aircraft gunners opened fire on them. These guys have nerves of iron. Flying in this weather is no joke. The phone rang again. Unit 5, Lieutenant Nock is on the phone. This time it's Colonel Henschel, commander of the Air Force covering the North Sea coast. What's the weather like, Nock? Terrible, Mr. Colonel. Visibility is a few meters. Nock, you have to take off. There's no other way. I just got a call from Reichsmarschall Göring. He's furious. Why aren't we in the air? The weather's too bad for us. And those damn Tommies flew all the way to Berlin. You don't know how I'm gonna tell the Reichsmarschall. These mosquitoes must be destroyed at all costs. Do you understand? Yes, Herr Colonel. Who do you intend to send? I'll go myself, along with Sergeant Wennekers. Very well. I wish you good luck. Thank you, Mr. Colonel. Wennekers and I are the only pilots in our unit who have experience flying blind. It's not the first time we've flown in this weather. We take off at 13:30 hours. I can hardly see a thing. Dan rain. Gradually descending, we fly over the very roofs of houses, trees, and power lines. Radio contact with the ground is normal. Lieutenant Kramer is correcting our flight from the ground. The Tommies are heading northwest through Bremen. I've set a course for the coast. The weather over the sea is no better. Latest ground reports indicate the mosquitoes are in Beta Quell Sector 8, heading 315. We're gonna spot them if we keep our eyes open. I wish it would stop raining. We could concentrate on those bastards. The time is 13.47. I can't see a thing. It's pissing me off. Base says you should be able to see them by now. Try turning a little to the left. I don't respond. A blurry shadow suddenly appears in front of me. It's a mosquito. It, too, noticed me and took a sharp upward turn to the left, almost scooping up water with its wing. Then it darted to the right, then darted left again. No, my friend. It's not that easy to get away from Nock. Every time he dodged, my line went right through his nose. We're flying low, very low, heading for the open sea. My Tommy leaves a faint trail. At full speed, he's heading 320. His speed is astonishingly high. But my good Gustav is going just as fast. I'm on Tommy's tail. Wennekers is gradually falling behind. His airplane can't keep up with such breakneck speed. I want to open fire from the closest distance, so I try to get closer to him. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, I crept up to the Tommy. closed the radiator caps, and got to within 50 meters of him. He's right in front of me. Shoot. Noke. Shoot. I pulled both triggers. The line pierced his left engine. His airplane is made of wood, so the wing caught fire and broke off. A few seconds later, the Mosquito disappeared into the green depths of the North Sea. This is my third. There was nothing left on the water but an oil slick. I wiped the sweat from my face. December 23, 1942. At 11:50, I returned from a convoy patrol. The cargo ships, escorted by a destroyer and 4 torpedo boats, entered the mouth of the Weser. With the tide, they will reach Bremerhaven. At 12:57, I'm going back there. The crews of the ships are standing on the decks and waving to us. They can't wait to get into port. 20 minutes later, I get my orders to return. As soon as I landed and the mechanics refueled my plane, the alarm was sounded again. The Blenheims are heading for our ships. We intercepted them off Norderney. There were 2 planes, but after spotting us, they disappeared into the clouds and never showed up again. Damn it, this is my 150th flight. I'd like to celebrate by increasing my combat score. It's Christmas Eve. Lilo is coming to see me with Ingrid, our little daughter. December 24, 1942. Christmas Eve. No activity on either side. The enemies observe a tacit truce. Lilo and I are together again. The first time the 3 of us are at the sparkling Christmas tree. I took little Ingrid in my arms. Her slender hands reach for the Christmas tree lights. There's a strange, peaceful silence. Lilo kissed her daughter and me. Her half-open lips radiate warmth and tenderness. The scent of perfume mingles with the smell of pine needles. A feeling of joy and happiness spreads through the room. Dieter Gerhard quietly knocked and entered. He kissed Lilo's hand and wished us a Merry Christmas. He and I would later go around to the pilots of our unit. The soldiers have decorated their rooms with Christmas trees or sprigs of fir. Now they are lying in their beds, reading, smoking, or sitting at the table, writing, playing cards. Merry Christmas to all. Thank you, Mr. Lieutenant, and we wish you the same. After a while, Dieter and I return to our rooms. The ground is covered with snow. It's unusual for the coast. The sounds of a harmonica are coming from the air. Silent night, holy night. It's the most beautiful of all German Christmas songs. Even the English, French, and Americans sing it today. Do they know it's a German song? Do they understand its deeper meaning? Why do people all over the world hate us Germans but sing German songs, listen to the music of German composers, Beethoven, Bach, read the poems of great German poets? Why? Far past midnight, Dieter, me and Lilo sat in my cozy room in deep, comfortable armchairs over a cup of hot punch. We were reminiscing about the events of this year coming to an end. How many times we had sat at this table together with Captain Dolenga and Lieutenant Steiger. Gerd Steiger, this calm, tall, red-haired fellow, was shot down before our eyes by a mosquito on the south side of the airfield. We found his body under the half-opened parachute. Lilo listened quietly. She smiled and stroked Dieter's long, straight hair. He wasn't very steady on his feet when he got up and wanted to go to his room. I think our punch was too strong for him. I'd walked him to his room. When I returned, Lilo was looking pensively through the ajar door of the bedroom at Ingrid sleeping in her crib. Our daughter is sleeping peacefully and quietly. At last we are alone, together again. January 27, 1943. On January 1, I was put in charge of the training courses for non-commissioned officers, which are organized every winter in the 2nd Fighter Division. I had already led these courses the previous year, so I was nicknamed the Last Prussian. I have to reckon with this nickname, even if it means nothing to me. We pilots don't do mushtra, but we do physical training, fortitude, and combat training of soldiers. Fortitude and combat training are the most important elements in the education of the German soldier. War condemns us to incredible difficulties. The campaign in Russia is costing us the greatest effort and the greatest sacrifice. A few days ago, we lost Stalingrad. The greatest battle in the history of this war is over. I briefly told my cadets, watching their grim faces, about the large-scale operation that ended with the encirclement and destruction of the Sixth Army. I made my way to the runway. The regiment, recruited in my hometown, was part of Paulus's army. Many of my classmates and childhood friends from Hanlon served in this regiment. They were taken from their mothers by the new Pied Piper. Looking at the snowy expanse outside the window, I imagined graves. Thousands and thousands of graves, each with a wooden cross with a steel helmet on top, in the endlessly stretching Russian winter. At noon, American bombers launched their first strike on the German coast of the North Sea. We had been expecting this for weeks. The raids were carried out by 4-engine heavy bombers, Consolidated Liberator, and Boeing B-17s. The Boeings are known to us. They are rightly called the Flying Fortress. This is not a stretch. They have exceptionally heavy armament, causing great difficulties for our command. Our intelligence for several months reported on these huge airplanes. Little by little, we mastered every technical detail of their design. As fighters, we were interested in their armament. 16 super heavy machine guns are arranged so that the field of fire from the airplane is devoid of blind spots. I spent many hours discussing with the pilots the best tactics to fight this airplane. We quickly made models and used them to demonstrate a variety of tactical maneuvers. Every minute of free time is devoted to calculating the optimum speed for different attack maneuvers. Long-range firing tables are made, drawings and plans are drawn, and new models are made. From the moment when our fighter squadron, stationed at the English Channel, first met the Flying Fortress and entered the battle, reports are constantly sent to our best fighter pilots to analyze, down to the smallest detail. During a raid on targets in France, the first Flying Fortress and Liberator were shot down. Thus was dispelled the myth that these monsters are invulnerable. Continued intensive instruction of fighter pilots sent to the defense of the Reich, their preparation for the coming fierce air battles. The creation of a complex network of radar curtains and additional ground stations equipped with, as well as the latest receiving and transmitting radio installations, made it very easy to detect and intercept aircraft over a large area. It is quite clear to me that today's first daylight attack by the Americans means a new phase of the air war. In the evening, I called my unit in Jever, Dieter Gerhard, and Lieutenant Frey, the designated commander, have shot down their first heavy bombers. They are excited to the extreme. Sergeant Muller was shot down but saved himself by parachuting out. I then sent a telegram to the division commander requesting my immediate return to the squadron. At such a time, my place is there with my comrades. At night, I left for Jever, February 4, 1943. From early morning, we were ready to take off on alert. The detection service had reported a large concentration of enemy planes over Yarmouth. I was anxious to meet them. The mood of the pilots was high. Every one of my comrades will fight hard when the show starts. 11.13, takeoff. In a minute, I'm in the air over the field. 11 of my comrades are flying alongside me. Message from base. Babies in Dora Nordpol sector. Proceed to Hanny 80. This means that the bombers are east of Leeuwarden, and I have to climb to an altitude of 8,000 meters. Suddenly, at 5,000 meters, the engine hisses. The plane can't go any higher. I contacted Dieter, handed over command to him, and returned to base in a frenzy. The mechanics crowded around my plane. What could have happened to the damn thing? It turned out that a pump blockage was preventing fuel from getting to the engine at high altitude. The mechanics worked like mad to fix the problem. 13 minutes later, I'm back in the air. Enemy planes in the Friedrich Paul area. That's far to the south. I've increased my speed. Now the engine is working perfectly. At an altitude of 7,000 meters, I entered the cloud zone. I must find my comrades. 8,000 meters. Babes in the Gustav Paula zone. The scum are heading south. They are 40 meters away from me. Follow course 20. What the hell? Why do I have to turn back? Doubting, I flew in the opposite direction. At my request, a landing order came from the base. I landed at 12.58. 2 minutes later, my comrades appeared. They too came in for landing. Lieutenant Kramer, the duty officer, called. He said that after reaching the south coast, the Americans turned around and flew back. There were no reports of a bombing raid. I didn't even have time to swear. At 13.08, I have to fly another convoy escort. This monotonous work I hate. February 26, 1943. What a day. I feel a fierce desire to grapple with a pack of Americans. The weather is fine. The sky is clear and cloudless. There is complete calm over Yarmouth. The pilots, wrapped in blankets, are basking in the spring sunshine. And I, squinting, lazily gazing at the sky. Dance music is coming from 2 huge speakers. We are enjoying a BBC music program for German soldiers. When the announcer began the propaganda, there was ironic laughter and applause. "Shut your mouth, boy. Give me the music." Suddenly, the music stopped. "Attention. Attention, everyone." Lieutenant Noak to the phone. "This is a call from Division Headquarters. Enemy planes have been spotted in the Dora Dora sector, so the Yanks are preparing to attack Yarmouth. At 10.50, we're ordered to be on standby. The Yanks are heading for Wilhelmshaven. 10.55. Alert. Hatches are closed. The mechanics are cranking the starter. My engine started right away. I saw how the others were doing. Everything's perfect. 12 airplanes took off at the same time in the right formation. I turned on the radio and called the base. Yelba 1 to Bodo. Yelba 1 to Bodo. Over. Over. Bodo to Yelba 1. Bodo to Yelba 1. Over. Communication with the ground is good. We're climbing rapidly to 8,000 meters. The little ones are in the Lithan Quell 8 zone. I turn left. Our planes leave a streak of smoke in the blue sky. Suddenly, I spotted enemy planes. It was an impressive sight. About 300 bombers gathered in one formation resembled a bunch of grapes. I checked my weapon and took aim. The enemy was a few kilometers away, heading south. I reported my observations to the base. Now their formation would turn into a disturbed beehive. I couldn't help but smile as I imagined the commotion. We got closer to them. I involuntarily picked up speed. Now I can see every airplane. Most of them are liberators. Their fat bellies seem to be stuffed with bombs. I've identified my victim. "I'm going to get you now, my friend," I muttered. "I want a frontal assault. I can see the Yankee in my sights. He's growing right in front of my eyes." I put my hand to the gas lights. A line went off behind my head. They're firing on me. Fire. I squeezed both of them, but the Yanks managed to get away. I can only see a few scratches on the right wing. I almost caught up with this fat-bellied guy, rushing after him. But I got into an aerodynamic bag. I was rocked, and at one point it even seemed that I was shot off the tail stabilizer. I went up steeply and turned to the left. The tracer came too close to me. Goddamn scrap heap. 300 heavy bombers in total are armed with nearly 5,000 heavy machine guns. Even if 1 out of every 10 has the ability to fire, that means we're going to get hit with a barrage of fire. I went in for a second frontal attack, coming down a little lower, and fired continuously until I was forced to swerve to avoid a collision. This time, I hit it. I ducked down and looked back. The lower part of the Liberator's fuselage was engulfed in fire. It had fallen far behind the main group. I attacked twice more, this time coming in from behind. I was met by a wall of fire. My plane shakes from the recoil of 2 guns and 13mm machine guns. I can see that I hit the top of the fuselage and the right wing, but I can't take my hands off the hash marks. Its right wing caught fire, and after a while it fell off altogether. The body of the wounded monster whirled around and flew downward. A long black tail stretched behind it. One of the crew tried to jump out with a parachute, but the parachute caught fire. Damn it. The body fell to the ground with a stone. The monstrous explosion that destroyed the fuselage of the bomber occurred at an altitude of 1,000 meters. Some of the flaming debris fell on a farm 200 to 300 meters from the Zwischenen airfield. The exploding tanks made the farmhouse catch fire. At great speed, I followed my victim, and having landed at the airfield, ran to the place where the airplane fell. People had already gathered there, rushing to put out the fire on the farm. I joined them, helping to rescue furniture, animals, and equipment from the burning buildings. The smoke was blinding, my throat constricted, and my overalls burned as I tried to pull a fat pig squealing like a madman out of a pigsty on fire. Finally, the house and barns were saved. The wreckage of the Liberator was scattered across the meadow, and in a pile of smoking wreckage lay the mutilated bodies of the pilots. At a distance of 1,000 meters, I found the commander's chair and the front wheel. A small figure, obviously a mascot, lay unharmed in the cockpit. An hour later, I landed in Jever. The guys carried me in their arms. This was my 4th victory in the 164th combat sortie, and the 1,004th time I'd been in the air since I started training with Van Dyken. Dieter shot down his 7th airplane and his 2nd heavy bomber. In addition, Radatz, Wennekers, and Dobrik each shot down the Flying Fortress. So that's a total of 5 airplanes shot down with no losses. I couldn't stop thinking about the American pilots. When will it be our turn? These men are as much romantics of the sky as we are. Now we are separated by the barrier of war, but after we die in the air, we will shake hands.